Welcome. This is a reading of an exegetical and biblical theological treatment of Genesis chapter 46. We will follow the text closely, tracing Yahweh's promise plan as it advances through the patriarchal narratives toward the formation of ethnic Israel and its eventual role in the redemption of the nations. Genesis chapter 46 marks a pivotal redemptive historical transition. The patriarchal story draws toward its close, and the focal point shifts geographically from the land of Canaan to Egypt. Jacob's family becomes a distinct national entity, Israelites. While the immediate narrative resolves the tension between Joseph and his brothers, this chapter functions as a canonical bridge. It connects the ancestral promises given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the later corporate redemption of the Exodus. Within the broader Hebraic horizon, humanity's rebellion at Babel led to Yahweh's judicial disinheritance of the 70 nations. Those nations were placed under the jurisdiction of lesser divine beings, while Jacob was chosen as Yahweh's personal inheritance. Genesis chapter 46 records the counter-movement, 70 covenant souls descending into Egypt under divine guarantee. This movement directly executes the words spoken to Abram in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 and 14, that the covenant seed would sojourn in a foreign land before emerging as a great nation. Far from a retreat from the promised land, this migration is a divinely ordained phase of preservation. It ensures the survival and multiplication of the holy seed. We turn now to the text itself. First, divine assurance and covenant continuity at Beersheba, verses 1 through 4. Jacob journeys south and stops at Beersheba to offer sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Beersheba carried deep sanctuary significance. Both Abraham and Isaac had established altars there and invoked the name of Yahweh. By pausing at this sacred threshold, Jacob seeks divine authorization before leaving the land of promise. God speaks to Jacob in visions of the night, calling his name twice, Jacob, Jacob, to signal covenant urgency. God identifies himself as Elohei Avika, God, the God of your father, linking the encounter to the historical line of patriarchal promise. Then comes the tripartite covenant mandate. God commands, "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt." 3 promises accompany the command. First, national proliferation. I will make you into a great nation there. Egypt, not Canaan, will serve as the incubator for Israel's demographic expansion. Second, divine presence in exile. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. Yahweh's covenant presence is not bound to geography. It accompanies his people into foreign territory. Third, personal peace. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. Tender assurance is given to Jacob concerning his death in a foreign land. Next, the table of 70, genealogical structure and national identity, verses 5 through 27. The narrative emphasizes the total relocation of Jacob's clan, livestock, and possessions included. The language shifts from individual names to corporate identity, Israelites, underscoring that the entire covenant community enters Egypt. The genealogy is organized matrilineally through Jacob's 4 wives, honoring the matriarchs as active participants in building the house of Israel. Leah's line yields 33 descendants, including the firstborn Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Zilpah's line yields 16 through Gad and Asher. Rachel's line yields 14, highlighting Joseph, with Ephraim and Manasseh born in Egypt, and Benjamin. Bilhah's line yields 7 through Dan and Naphtali. The theological weight of the number 70 is deliberate. 66 direct offspring enter Egypt. The total reaches 70 when Jacob, Joseph, and Joseph's 2 sons are included. 70, the product of 7, signaling completeness, and 10, signaling fullness, symbolizes an ideal corporate unit. This number shows the initial fulfillment of the Abrahamic promise of numerous offspring. A solitary old man's family has expanded into a full assembly. Typologically, the 70 souls of Israel parallel the 70 nations listed in Genesis chapter 10. This small covenant group is formed to serve as Yahweh's vehicle of redemption for the disinherited nations. Finally, the Goshen strategy, preservation through segregation, verses 28 through 34. Jacob sends Judah ahead to prepare the way to Goshen, signaling Judah's emerging preeminence. Joseph meets his father in a royal chariot. Their reunion is marked by profound emotion. Joseph falls upon Jacob's neck and weeps. Jacob declares, in effect, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know you are still alive." Joseph then instructs his brothers to declare themselves keepers of livestock before Pharaoh. He leverages the Egyptian cultural disdain for foreign shepherds, an abomination, to secure the isolated fertile region of Goshen. This strategic isolation prevents assimilation into Egyptian culture and religion. The holy seed remains geographically and socially distinct during its centuries of growth. Later canonical writers draw organically upon these historical realities. In Acts chapter 7, verses 14 and 15, Stephen recounts, Joseph sending for Jacob and all his relatives, 75 souls according to the Septuagint reckoning. Stephen uses the migration to show that God's presence and redemptive activity were never confined to the temple or the land, but accompanied the patriarchs into exile. Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 through 15 draws a structural typology. The infant Jesus flees to Egypt, and Matthew cites Hosea chapter 11, verse 1, "Out of Egypt I called my son," presenting Jesus as the true corporate embodiment of Israel who retraces the exile and exodus path of Genesis chapter 46. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 21 and 22 highlights the faith of Jacob and Joseph in Egypt. Jacob's willingness to descend and his deathbed blessings are framed as forward-looking trust in the still unfulfilled Abrahamic land promises. The Egyptian sojourn is recognized as a temporary stage in God's larger plan. Romans chapter 4, verses 13 through 17 reflects on the patriarchal promises of offspring that begin demographically with the 70 souls of Genesis chapter 46. Paul argues that Abraham was appointed heir of the world, so that the multiplying seed of Jacob prefigures a multi-ethnic family of faith comprising both Jews and Gentiles. In theological synthesis, Genesis chapter 46 demonstrates the organic unity of divine revelation and Yahweh's unyielding fidelity to his covenant oaths. God sovereignly integrates human displacement, political realignment, and societal taboos to preserve his redemptive program. By sending Jacob's family into Egypt, God fulfills his ancient word to Abram while creating a controlled environment in which a small clan multiplies into a holy nation without assimilating into Canaanite wickedness or Egyptian paganism. Promise Plan theology maintains a non-supersessionist posture. The physical, historical reality of ethnic Israel entering Egypt as a distinct family is not allegorized away. Rather, the concrete preservation of ethnic Israel in Goshen forms the indispensable historical bedrock through which the singular seed, Jesus Christ, enters human history. The numerical correspondence between the 70 souls of Israel and the 70 nations of Genesis chapter 10 underscores that Israel's national election was never an end in itself, but the divine instrument for restoring Yahweh's rule over all creation. Genesis chapter 46 therefore affirms that God remains faithful to his concrete promises to physical Israel within the ultimate expanded scope of his one people gathered from every nation.